If you want to accelerate your career and grow your influence in learning and development, one of the best things you can do is provide your stakeholders and business leaders with evidence of your success. In other words, you need to show them the positive impact that your learning solutions and programs have on the business. And the Kirkpatrick Model of evaluation is arguably the most popular and widely accepted way to do that. It's a simple model developed by Donald Kirkpatrick in 1959 that proposes 4 levels of evaluation for learning projects, often depicted like a pyramid. In order of increasing importance, those 4 levels are reaction, learning, behavior, and results. In this video, I'm going to break down each level and provide you with some practical ways that you can use them. Let's start with level 1. Reaction. Level 1 measures your learner's reaction to the learning event, the product, the content, and the delivery method. In other words, what was their experience with your learning design? At this level, you're trying to uncover things like, did the learner enjoy the experience? Did they leave feeling confident that they can do the job? Did we focus on the right things? Did we give them enough support? What can we do better next time? So how do you get to level 1 data? You usually gather this information with post-training surveys and interviews. I usually prefer surveys because anonymity makes new hires more honest, and I can see trends over time by always asking the same questions. In my post-training surveys, I get a lot of actionable insights from open response questions. For example, I just did an analysis of a level 1 survey at work. Less than 2% of almost 700 participants said that the training needs improvement. But when I categorized the open response answers, I found that 25% of them were recommending improvements. There are a lot of ways to create a level 1 survey. I created a template for post-training surveys that will help you capture the most important information. You can use it, change it, use it as a starting place, whatever helps you. If you want a copy, just click the link below. Before we move on from level 1, there's an important question we need to ask. Does this information matter to your stakeholders? It does a little. Measuring something is always better than measuring nothing. But if you want to persuade the CFO to give you funding for extra headcount and resources, you're going to need more persuasive data than how your learner felt about the training. One reason for this is that there are some obvious challenges with this level. First off, it doesn't really tell you much about how the training impacted the business or even the learner's performance. Second, learners, especially new hires, are very likely to give your learning experience top marks because of the power dynamics created when someone starts a new job. It's like when your performance review comes around and your boss asks how they can improve. You're probably going to get a little uncomfortable and then spend the next 5 minutes explaining how great they are and how you would never want to work anywhere else. That's what a lot of learners do on post-training surveys, just like you probably did on your last employee engagement survey. So if all that's true, how do you convince your learners to give you more honest feedback? One obvious answer is to work on building trust with them so they believe you when you say you really do want them to tell you where you can improve. Bonus points if you can persuade them that their answers really are anonymous. It's easier to do this if learners are in larger groups because anonymity is hard to sell in a 2 to 3 person class. But I think it's okay to accept some of the constraints here. For example, I don't expect my new hires to have complete trust in the company and its leadership after the first week or 2, which is why I provide open response questions and periodically sort each response to understand what the learner really wants. I've found that people are more likely to share their honest thoughts in open response questions because they can control how they communicate their recommendations. Another thing I do is create a little distance from the learner and the training event. I don't want to ask them if the training event was helpful right after they leave. I want to give them some time to experiment with the things that they learned. One caveat, this can make it more challenging to get trainees to actually complete the survey, since that's easier to control in the classroom. But I can't expect them to tell me how well they were prepared to do their job if they haven't done their job yet. So I'm okay with that. I usually wait at least a week before sending the survey out. That seems to be enough time for them to experiment with things without forgetting everything about their training experience. One more comment on this. I've seen some discussions online that claim that level 1 doesn't matter because your stakeholders don't care and outcomes are more important than how your learner feels about the training. I both agree and disagree with people who say things like that. I agree that outcomes are more important than how people feel about training. However, I believe, like most of you, that a better experience will create better outcomes. In other words, I think it does matter what my learners think and feel about their training. And the best part about level 1 is that if you gather the right information, it can tell you how to improve the learner's experience. And a better experience can lead to more confidence and satisfaction with a job or task. That confidence and satisfaction translates to things like less turnover and higher performance at work. But your ability to get an honest response from your learners has a big impact on the usefulness of this data. They have to believe that you want honest responses. And that can be tricky because their experience is heavily influenced by how the trainer, hiring manager, or leader responds to their questions and challenges. So yes, this level does matter, but it's not enough by itself. We need to use multiple types of evaluation to improve and report on the success of our learning designs. Which brings us to level 2, Learning. I have a confession. I don't love this level. Level 2 attempts to use assessments to evaluate if a learner has met the learning objectives. In other words, we're trying to evaluate if someone has gained the knowledge or skills we wanted them to acquire in the training. And to do this, we can use a variety of assessment types. For example, formative, summative, and performance assessments. And there are dozens of ways to use those 3 types of assessments. But what do we do every time? Multiple choice quizzes. We're obsessed with them, and I have to admit that I find them mostly useless. I've never met a business leader whose primary goal was helping their team perform better on multiple choice quizzes. They're a terrible way to measure if someone can do something in the real world. It almost never makes its way back into the instructor's plan for the learner's future development. And since we can't have people not pass training, because that would be embarrassing for the learner and for us, we just give them unlimited quiz attempts. Super effective, right? One more thing, and this last part is a bit of a tangent, but I'm going there anyways. I don't love the name learning for this level. If you studied the word learning, you know that there's a lot to unpack there. Most of us don't even agree on what that word really means, which is why I prefer to call level 2 assessment, because for most people, that's what it actually is. Another problem with this is that a test is only as good as the person who writes it, and there are a lot of ways to write a bad test question. We could do a whole video on that topic alone. Maybe we will someday. If that would be useful to you, let me know in the comments. The good news is that you can make learning assessments that are useful. If you want this level to be meaningful, you need to measure the things that you're expecting learners to do in real life, which means you're going to have to get comfortable with different kinds of assessments. For example, if you're trying to train a sales representative to successfully overcome customer objections, you wouldn't want to just present him with an objection and a list of possible responses to choose from, because you don't need to know if he could select the right option on a test. You need to know that he can respond to a customer in real time. A better assessment for this learning goal would be some kind of performance assessment, where the sales rep role plays with someone in real time and is evaluated by an expert using a rubric. Before you protest, I acknowledge that there's some obvious challenges with this type of assessment. For one, it's hard to scale. That's one reason why multiple choice quizzes are so popular. It's easy to scale a quiz, but if you're training 50 sales reps, it takes a lot of time to evaluate their performance in person with an expert. And the assessor gets tired. The 50th trainee gets a lot less of their attention than the first one. But the good news is that this is the 21st century, and there's technology that can help you solve this problem, particularly with dialogue-based performance. 2 products that come to mind are Bongo and Rehearsal. Both of them provide real-time video roleplay software that can provide feedback to learners at scale. The learner gets a video prompt, and they respond with a video on their phone like they're having a conversation. Those videos can be graded by either a real person or the software using a rubric that you wrote. This video is not sponsored by them, but I've used both of them in my career, and I think you should check them out. All that being said, I understand why we use multiple choice quizzes so often. They're easy to administer, and other types of evaluation are difficult. They take more time, money, and people than we have available, and a lot of us justifiably conclude that something is better than nothing. So the real question is, what can we do to make level 2 more meaningful? It's actually pretty simple. Whenever possible, measure the actual thing the learner needs to do, preferably in the real world and not in the classroom. And when, not if you use multiple choice quizzes, write relevant questions with realistic options. And when learners finish those quizzes and tests, use the questions they missed to help you decide what they still need to learn, and tailor your instruction to that performance. Just like level 1, level 2 can be useful, but we still have more work to do if we want to demonstrate the impact of learning on real outcomes, which brings us to the next 2 levels. This is where we get to the good stuff. Level 3 and 4 are where careers are made, because these are the same things that your stakeholders and business leaders care about. If you can demonstrate an impact here, business leaders will be begging you to do more. And that all starts with Kirkpatrick Level 3. Behavior. Level 3 tries to answer questions like, did the learner's experience change in the real world? Is the learner doing something different as a result of the training? In other words, does our training really matter, or was it a total waste of time? For example, let's say you're creating training for customer service agents, and your goal is to reduce the number of customers who cancel their services. One behavior that could have a big impact is the number of attempts made to persuade customers not to cancel, either by resolving the problem or offering an incentive. In other words, it's reasonable to assume that if a customer service rep tries more often to save customers, the number of cancellations would go down. So how do you measure something like that? After all, you're not usually the leader of that business function. You don't control their performance dashboards or data collection processes. I'm going to tell you a little secret that most successful L&D leaders know. One surefire way to build training that matters to the business is to first find out what they're already measuring and then build learning solutions to help improve those metrics. If you do this, instead of recommending new things for them to measure, your stakeholders will love you because any success that you have will make them look amazing. You'll quickly become a key business partner and consultant for them, and they'll want you in the room for every important project. I'm not trying to oversimplify this, but most L&D leaders who struggle with level 3 have the same challenges. The business isn't measuring the behaviors they want to measure, they don't have easy access to the data the business is already collecting, or they don't have enough influence to get the business to start measuring behaviors that they're trying to impact. There's a lot you can do to help here, but it starts by identifying the behaviors that you want learners to stop and start. Finally, let's talk about the monarch of all measures of success in learning, Kirkpatrick Level 4. Results. You don't need to make a very big jump from level 3 to level 4. Just look at the behavior changes your learners made after training and ask the question, how did the behavior change impact the bottom line? The gold standard for level 4 results is dollars made and dollars saved. For example, let's say a training event or resource successfully persuades customer service agents to increase the number of attempts to prevent customers from canceling. It's reasonable to assume that more attempts to retain customers would lead to less customer turnover, and you can quantify that result in a lot of different ways. For example, how many additional customers were retained? How much additional revenue was generated from those customers? What was the impact on the average LTV of your customers? How much does it usually cost to acquire a new customer? And how much was saved by retaining more customers from things like customer acquisition costs and onboarding costs? What I'm trying to say here is that each customer saved has an impact on the company's revenue and costs, which is a beautiful thing for you, because now you're seen as someone who's directly contributing to the success of the business. And those are the types of people that business leaders want to keep around. Those are the types of learning leaders that build powerful, transformative L&D teams. Moving from level 3 to level 4 can feel like a leap. You often need to make some informed assumptions to translate behavior change into dollars. And that's okay. It's the same thing that your counterparts in operations and sales are already doing. Just put your assumptions up front when you report results. For example, you could say something like, for our calculations, we spoke to the finance team to get an average cost saving of $450 per year for each retained customer. We'd be happy to break down that number with you if you'd like. All right, one more thing. Learning and development is often considered a cost center to the business, meaning that most businesses think about it as something that spends the company's money, not something that helps generate revenue. One big reason for this is that a lot of L&D leaders struggle to demonstrate their value to the company by finding ways to measure what actually matters to the business. That's why levels 3 and 4 are so important. If I'm a CEO or chief operations officer, I don't care how many training events happen this year, and I don't care how many 5-star reviews your training gets. I care about employee retention, customer retention, sales, cost saving, and any improvement to behavior that has a direct impact on the bottom line. Over the last 24 months, I've proactively reached out to and met with dozens of learning executives to ask about their career and how they accomplished so much. Unsurprisingly, the ones that have experienced the most success have gone out of their way to numerically demonstrate the value they bring to the business. Those are the leaders that get the chance to prove that learning and training really do matter. And those are the leaders who receive extra funds from the business to grow their team into a large workforce with a real impact. Many of those executives gave me some variation on this advice. It's better to be a business person who does learning than a learning person in a business. And I love the Kirkpatrick model because it provides a simple roadmap for how to do that. That's all I have. I'll catch you next time.